What happens to a man who has been through a war and comes home to find he is nowhere to be found? The story of a homeless war vet enters a quiet town seeking nothing but food and peace of mind, but finds nothing but suspicion, humiliation, and brutality instead. And when the justice system turns on him, he not only defends himself, he becomes the war he's been fighting. This is the story of John Rambo. The story begins with John Rambo, a veteran of the Green Berets and a decorated veteran of the Vietnam War, wandering alone in the countryside. Rambo is seeking his last living friend from the war and is holding on to a small glimmer of hope that he will be able to reconnect with someone who understands him. This is not only a search for a man, it is Rambo's search for a place of belonging in a world that has grown more and more alienated from him over the years. However, Rambo's hope is short-lived when he arrives and discovers that his friend has died of cancer caused by his exposure to Agent Orange during the war.
Delmar's gone.
What time will he be back?
He died.
What?
Rambo does nothing but apologize for his friend's condition and then walks away. This does nothing to show Rambo's emotions over the news of his friend's death. It simply shows how emotionally exhausted Rambo has become and how alienated he has become from human emotions. And in that moment, it is painfully obvious that Rambo is completely alone. He was basically the last man standing of his original unit. With no one left to turn to, no family to go to, and seemingly no direction to go in, Rambo continues walking forward as a man who is completely lost in his past and his present. Finally, Rambo arrives at a small town called Hope. This was a place which looks peaceful, but is ruled by Sheriff Will Teasel, a man who is ruled by his ego and pride. When Sheriff Teasel lays eyes on Rambo, he immediately judges Rambo on how he looks and decides he is a drifter with no place in his town. Without giving Rambo a chance, he throws him out of town. But Rambo does not want to be treated unfairly, so he walks back into town, even though he was offered a ride out of town on its outskirts. This upsets Sheriff Teasel because his ego has been bruised by Rambo's actions. Teasel stops Rambo once again and demands identification and searches him aggressively. When he finds Rambo's survival knife, he arrests him for carrying a knife. At the police station, the situation becomes worse as the deputies make fun of and abuse Rambo physically. Rambo's silence is interpreted as defiance by the police officers, and they beat him and use a hose to spray him. The situation becomes worse when the police officers try to shave Rambo. At this moment, Rambo is not at the police station. He is in the war and experiencing flashbacks of the war's brutality and torture he suffered during the war in Vietnam. Rambo, being pushed beyond his limits, goes into survival mode. Using his superior training, he overcomes the deputies and escapes the police station. He grabs his knife and flees the scene, stealing a motorcycle and leaving the town. The sheriff, Teasel, gives chase, and the two engage in a high-speed chase, which ultimately leads them into the mountains. Rather than letting Rambo go, Teasel makes the situation even worse by calling in reinforcements, turning a minor incident into a full-scale manhunt. In the wilderness, Rambo finds himself wounded and alone, but this is an environment where he excels. However, when the deputy in the chopper decides to fire on John Rambo out of revenge, the situation takes a dramatic turn. With no way to escape and bullets whizzing through the air, Rambo is left with a desperate decision to make. In a bid to survive, he leaps off a cliff. Though the fall leaves him wounded, his training and instincts keep him alive. Rambo refuses to give up and decides to fight back with whatever is available to him, leading to the deputy losing his balance and falling to his death. This is a major turning point in the film, as the authorities declare Rambo a fugitive. However, the truth of the matter is that Rambo is not attacking without a cause. Rather, he is defending himself against unjust aggression. As the chase gets harder, John Rambo changes his tactics from mere running to strategic fighting. He uses his training as an elite soldier to outmaneuver the deputies through guerrilla warfare. He lays traps and ambushes them one by one. The forest becomes his strongest ally. Even though he has the advantage over his pursuers, he does not kill the officers. Instead, he incapacitates them. This shows that his main aim is survival rather than revenge. The deputies quickly learn that they are no match for the man they have been chasing. They have unknowingly walked into the territory of a highly skilled soldier. Finally, Rambo faces Sheriff Will Teasel in the woods, holding a knife to his throat, with complete dominance of the situation. Despite having every chance to take Teasel's life, Rambo chooses not to do so. What he does instead is give them a chilling threat. If he continues being pursued, he will give them a war they won't believe. This scene shows Rambo not being fueled by a desire for violence, but by his need to protect himself from being pushed too far. As the situation gets out of hand, reinforcements arrive in the area, and they include state police, National Guard, and Colonel Samuel Troutman, the previous commanding officer of John Rambo. While all the others know who Rambo is and what his crimes have been, Troutman understands him for who he really is. Troutman understands Rambo not just as a fugitive, but as a highly trained Green Beret who has been through the brutality of war. Troutman understands Rambo to have extraordinary survival skills, unmatched combat skills, and the ability to outsmart anyone who is sent to capture him. Troutman understands that the man he is up against is not just a fugitive, but a man who is built for such a situation. Troutman also warns Sheriff Will Teasel that he is not fighting an ordinary man, but one who is capable of surviving everything and making the environment work for him as well. He clearly states that he is not there to save Rambo, but to save everyone else from him. However, due to Teasel's ego and authority issues, he is not willing to back down from the chase. He refuses to listen to Troutman's warning and continues to chase Rambo even more aggressively. This is taking the situation to disaster because the people are not taking into account Rambo's abilities. What could have been resolved amicably is now heading for complete destruction due to ego issues. After going through the relentless manhunt, John Rambo finally escapes the mountains and heads back to the town of Hope. But this time, everything is different, and he is no longer running or hiding. Rather, he is making a powerful and deliberate statement. By hijacking a military truck, Rambo smashes through the police barricades and forcefully re-enters the town that rejected and mistreated him. His re-entry into the town is a dramatic turning point, and the conflict now moves from manhunt to confrontation. What follows is a chaotic and explosive escalation. Rambo systematically targets the town's infrastructure, destroying property, causing explosions, and even cutting off the electricity supply by knocking out the power grid. Darkness descends upon the town of Hope, adding to the fear and confusion among the residents. The once peaceful town is now a war zone, reminiscent of the wars that Rambo can never escape. This destruction is not random. Moreover, it is a reflection of the emotional turmoil and psychological scars that he carries. What was once a struggle for survival has now become something more symbolic. Rambo is making the world face the consequences of its own actions, showing the world what happens when a broken man is pushed to the limits and has nothing but pain and rage to offer. The climax of emotion and drama occurs when Sheriff Will Teasel readies himself for one final confrontation at the police station. He has no intention of losing this battle, so he readies himself for one final stand, one he feels is his duty. Meanwhile, John Rambo continues his path of destruction through the police station, utilizing his training skills to bring destruction to all he encounters. The police station, a symbol of authority, has become a battle zone as Rambo continues his destruction, finally encountering Sheriff Teasel, whom he wounds and renders helpless. As Rambo prepares to take Sheriff Teasel's life, he is interrupted by Colonel Samuel Troutman, who places himself between Rambo and Teasel, ending the cycle of violence. This is where the movie takes a drastic turn, from one of action and adrenaline to one of emotion and heartache. Rambo's tough exterior finally shows signs of weakness as he breaks down emotionally before Colonel Troutman, overwhelmed by all he has been through. In a profoundly powerful and moving monologue, Rambo talks about his experiences of trauma and pain in the war, the death of his comrades, and the pain of coming back to a world that did not want him. He talks about the pain of having risked his life for his country and then being treated like an outcast upon his return. This is a man who is not driven by violence, but by pain and trauma. This is the tragedy of the character of Rambo, not as a violent man, but as a wounded soul trying to deal with the trauma and pain of his experiences. Colonel Samuel Troutman is a man who understands and sympathizes with John Rambo as he speaks to him and understands the pain and suffering he has been through. Unlike others who saw Rambo as a threat and wanted to harm him, Colonel Troutman sees the man for who he is and understands the pain he is in. He is a calm and peaceful presence and helps to bring Rambo to a moment of clarity as he is in a state of turmoil and chaos. Rambo then decides to surrender peacefully and bring the situation to a close, not as a sign of defeat, but as a sign of release from pain and suffering. And that's the story of First Blood, a movie that's not only an action film, but also carries a deep message for society regarding trauma and the identity of war veterans. Rambo never wanted to be violent. He was compelled to be so because of society's inability to understand him. The real tragedy is not Rambo's actions, but the circumstances that led him to these actions. If you liked this breakdown of the movie, be sure to like and subscribe for more such movie recaps. For sometimes, the greatest battles are not won on the battlefields, but within the minds of people.